They taped a bright orange envelope to his front door, right in the center, bold letters screaming, HOA violation notice, $250 fine, expired exterior paint. He stared at it for a long second, the paper flapping slightly in the breeze. The paint wasn't peeling. It wasn't even faded. It was just not the exact shade they liked. Across the street, 3 board members stood together, whispering and smirking like hall monitors on a power trip. Their arms were crossed, their eyes sharp. They thought they were teaching him a lesson. They had no idea who they were dealing with, because while they were busy writing fines, he was signing papers. And by the time they tried to escalate their little war, he didn't just own his home. He owned the entire building they were sitting in. This is a story of how the HOA picked the wrong man. Marcus Fields wasn't the kind of man who liked drama. At 38, he'd already seen enough of it. In his career, in his marriage, and in life. He was an engineer by trade, precise, methodical, always thinking 3 steps ahead. After his divorce, Marcus promised himself one thing: peace. No noise, no arguments, no surprises. That promise led him to the Sycamore Villas, a sleek, picture-perfect condo community nestled in the Colorado foothills. The kind of place that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. Identical houses lined up like soldiers, driveways polished, flower beds trimmed to mathematical precision. The brochure had said, luxury living, order, harmony. But Marcus would soon learn what that really meant. Because here, harmony was enforced one fine at a time. The HOA at Sycamore Villas had a reputation. They weren't just organized, they were obsessive. Uniform lawns, HOA-approved curtain colors, mailbox heights. Even the sound of your doorbell had to meet a specific decibel limit. They didn't just manage the neighborhood. They micromanaged every inch of it. Marcus had bought Unit 209, a quiet corner condo with a balcony overlooking the mountains. For him, it was perfect, peaceful, tucked away, with golden light spilling into his living room every morning. He planted succulents on his balcony, fixed up the kitchen himself, and finally exhaled for the first time in years. For Marcus, it was home. For the HOA, it was a project to control. It started small. Just 2 weeks after moving in, a letter arrived, folded neatly inside his mailbox. Dear Mr. Fields, please repaint your balcony railing to HOA standard gray within 14 days. Thank you for helping us maintain community standards. Marcus frowned. He stepped outside and ran his hand along the railing. Smooth, perfectly painted. The color was a deep charcoal, elegant, modern, and approved by the previous owner. According to the realtor, he ignored it. But a week later, another letter appeared. This time, the tone was different, colder. Your exterior paint appears faded and out of compliance with HOA standards. Please correct this issue immediately. Marcus sighed. He took photos of the paint and attached them to a polite email. Hello. The paint is less than a year old and was HOA approved by the previous owner. I've attached photos showing its condition. Please confirm receipt. Marcus Fields. He hit send, then waited. No reply. 3 days later, a bright orange envelope was taped to his front door in bold black letters. HOA violation notice, $250 fine, expired exterior paint. He stood there for a moment, the paper fluttering in the mountain wind, his reflection faintly visible in the glass door. Across the street, 2 board members stood chatting, glancing at him, smirking as if watching a new neighbor get initiated. Marcus felt something shift inside him. Not anger, not yet, but awareness. He could already see what kind of people he was dealing with. He sent another email, calm, professional, logical. The paint is less than a year old. This fine is a mistake. Please confirm that this matter is resolved. The next morning, a new envelope arrived. Failure to comply will result in escalating penalties and potential legal action. No discussion, no courtesy, no sense, just power and the thrill of using it. Marcus looked at the letter, then at the mountain ridge glowing under the setting sun. He muttered quietly to himself, All right then, if it's a game you want. He folded the notice, placed it neatly in a drawer, and began a plan that would turn their rules against them. Because what the HOA didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just a homeowner. He was a strategist. And soon, they'd be playing on his property. By week 3, Marcus had learned the truth about the Sycamore Villas HOA. They weren't a group of neighbors keeping order. They were a small-town power club run by people who loved control more than community. Their president, Linda Crawford, had been in charge for nearly a decade. 50s, blonde bob haircut, designer glasses that matched every outfit. She'd tell anyone who'd listen that she ran a tight ship. And she did, right down to the color of your porch light. Her 2 loyal board members, Dan and Sharon, followed her lead like soldiers. If she said a mailbox was 1 inch too tall, Dan measured it. If she said someone's grass was too long, Sharon took photos. To them, authority was addictive. Residents whispered about them behind closed doors. But in public, they smiled. Because at Sycamore Villas, the HOA wasn't just a board. It was law. Marcus had lived in rough neighborhoods and worked under tougher bosses. He'd dealt with inspectors, contractors, and corporate audits. But this was personal. It started with the letters, then came the inspections. He'd find someone standing outside his balcony during the day, clipboard in hand, jotting notes. When he stepped outside, they'd wave and pretend to be checking landscaping compliance. At one point, they even used a paint color reader, pressing it against his wall to verify shade accuracy. Marcus almost laughed. Almost. But when he asked to peel the fine, things escalated. Linda scheduled a review at the clubhouse, the kind of place that smelled like lemon polish and old coffee. Marcus showed up early, documents neatly in hand, photos printed in color, evidence lined up like a case file. He expected logic. He found ego. Linda barely looked up when he entered. "Mr. Fields," she said flatly, "I hope you come prepared to show that you complied." He set the photos on the table. "The paint was approved under your own HOA color chart. I just bought the unit last month. Nothing's changed." Linda adjusted her glasses, flipped through the papers without really reading, then looked up and smiled that tight, self-satisfied smile. "Mr. Fields, you signed the agreement when you moved in. Rules are rules. We can't make exceptions. That's how disorder begins." Her tone dripped with condescension. Marcus stayed calm, though inside, a quiet spark had already lit. He said softly, "You mean that's how control begins?" Linda's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "Nothing," Marcus replied. "Just curious how far you're willing to take this." She didn't answer. Instead, she slid another document across the table. An escalation notice. Another $250 fine, doubled for non-compliance. Marcus left the meeting silent, but he didn't crumple the papers. He didn't curse. He walked to his car, opened the passenger seat, and placed the letter down like a chess move on a board. Because, in that moment, he realized what kind of game this was. This wasn't about paint. It wasn't about property values or community pride. It was about power. And the one thing people like Linda never expect is that someone they underestimate might have more of it than they do. That night, Marcus sat at his desk with a quiet determination. He opened his laptop, pulled up county property records, and started searching. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for until he found it. A small 2-story office suite just down the street from Sycamore Villas. He blinked. The name on the property? The Sycamore Villas Homeowners Association Management, LLC. The listing status? Foreclosure. Delinquent taxes. 30 days from auction. He leaned back, a slow smile forming. The HOA thought they owned him, but they didn't even own the roof above their own heads. He whispered to himself, almost amused, "Let's see how they like playing by someone else's rules." He reached for his phone, dialed his attorney. "Hey, Tom, it's Marcus. I think I've found an investment worth looking at." For the next few weeks, Marcus barely said a word. To the neighbors, he looked calm, maybe even indifferent. But behind that quiet exterior, he was working. He called his lawyer, an old friend named Tom Price, a man who'd handled his past property deals. Tom answered with his usual dry humor. "Marcus, I can hear it in your voice. Who's pissed you off this time? Marcus chuckled. Not pissed, Tom. Just motivated. He explained everything. The fines, the harassment, the arrogance. Then he sent over the foreclosure listing. Tom skimmed it and whistled. You're telling me the HOA's management office, the place where they run their entire operation, is going up for auction next month? Exactly, Marcus said. And I want it. Tom paused. You're serious? Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring out the window at the snow-dusted mountains. Completely, but we're not buying it under my name. Within days, paperwork started moving quietly through the system. Marcus created a small holding company, Blue Rock Properties, LLC, registered out of Denver. Clean, anonymous, impossible for anyone at Sycamore Villas to trace back to him. He wired the down payment. His lawyer handled the bidding. And when the auction finally closed, Marcus Fields was the silent owner of the HOA's administrative building. That little two-story suite with beige walls and cracked parking spaces. The one where Linda and her board held their meetings, signed fines, and plotted their petty power trips, now belonged to him. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was preparation. Because Marcus understood something most people didn't. You don't win by shouting. You win by owning the ground your enemies stand on. He kept it quiet, didn't tell a soul. He continued paying his HOA dues, even the ridiculous fines. On time, every time. Linda took that as submission. She bragged to her board that Mr. Fields had finally learned how things worked around here. They laughed about it over catered sandwiches in that same office, the one he now owned. The irony would have been delicious if Marcus weren't saving it for something bigger. One evening, Marcus received another notice. This one accused him of having unapproved exterior lighting. A $500 fine. He smiled, folded the paper, and decided the time had come. He waited until the next HOA meeting, a Thursday night, 6:30 p.m. sharp, in his building. He arrived early, dressed in a navy suit, calm, confident. The fluorescent lights hummed above him as he walked down the hallway, hearing the muffled voices inside the boardroom. Linda's voice carried over the noise. If Mr. Fields wants to keep challenging our rules, maybe we should move forward with legal action. Marcus pushed open the door. The room went still. Linda looked up, a hint of irritation flickering across her face. Mr. Fields, you're early. Are you here to dispute another violation? Marcus smiled, setting a slim manila folder on the table. Actually, I'm here for business. Business? She frowned. You mean your paint? No, he said. I mean your office. Linda blinked. What are you talking about? Marcus slid the folder toward her. Slow, deliberate. Inside the deed. Signed, stamped, dated. My company, Blue Rock Properties, purchased this building last month. You'll find your new lease agreement inside. Rent's due on the 1st. For a long second, no one moved. Then Dan, the vice president, leaned forward. You're kidding! Marcus smiled. Check the county records if you think I am. Linda's face drained of color. She flipped through the papers, her hand trembling. You can't. Oh, I can, Marcus said quietly. And don't worry, I'm a fair landlord, but I expect professionalism from my tenants. He straightened his jacket and added, including fair treatment of residents. All of them. No shouting, no threats, just facts and power. Linda didn't say a word for the rest of the meeting. The board sat in stunned silence as Marcus walked out, his shoes echoing down the hallway he now owned. And by the time the next notice was due, none came. The news spread faster than wildfire through Sycamore Villas. By the next morning, every resident had heard the same rumor whispered in disbelief. Marcus Fields owned the HOA building. Some didn't believe it at first. Others thought it was some kind of joke, a rumor to poke fun at Linda and her board. But when the notice of ownership transfer arrived in the HOA's mailbox, stamped and verified by the county, the laughter stopped. Marcus didn't flaunt it. He didn't gloat. He simply let the paperwork do the talking. And that silence was louder than any argument he could have made. Within days, the board was scrambling. Their lease renewal demanded something they'd never been used to: accountability. The rent on their office, the same office they once ruled from, had tripled overnight. Marcus had done his homework. Market rates, insurance clauses, maintenance fees. Every line was airtight. Tom, his lawyer, had drafted it perfectly. No loopholes, no backdoors. If the HOA wanted to operate out of that building, they had to pay him every month, on time. Linda called an emergency meeting. The recording leaked later, her voice shaking. "We can't afford this. We barely have enough in reserve as it is." Dan muttered something under his breath. Maybe we shouldn't have found a guy for paint. But it was too late. Marcus sat on his balcony that evening, watching the sunset roll over the mountains. The same balcony they once fined him for. The same paint they called non-compliant. It gleamed gold in the fading light. He took a slow sip of coffee, listening to the quiet hum of the neighborhood below. No letters in the mail slot. No threats of fines. No more HOA patrols circling like vultures. Peace had returned, and it was earned. The following week, something strange happened. Marcus received a handwritten letter, not typed, not stamped, from Linda herself. It read, "Mr. Fields, on behalf of the Sycamore Villas Homeowners Association, I want to apologize for the way your situation was handled. We allowed pride to override fairness. I hope we can move forward in good faith." Marcus read it twice, then folded it gently and placed it in his drawer. No need for revenge anymore. He'd already won, and he hadn't raised his voice once. Weeks passed. The HOA kept paying rent like clockwork. Marcus's company quietly grew, one property, then another. He never mentioned it to anyone in the neighborhood. To them, he was still just a quiet engineer in Unit 209, the man who kept himself and minded his business. But when the annual HOA meeting came around, they did something no one expected. They offered him a seat on the board. He smiled politely. "I appreciate it," he said, "but I think I'll stay right where I am." And as he walked away, he couldn't help but smile, because he finally understood what his grandfather used to say: "Real power doesn't shout, son. It signs papers." The HOA thought they could find him into submission. Instead, they ended up paying him rent. And when the dust settled, Marcus didn't need revenge. He already owned the ground they stood on. Months passed. Sycamore Villas looked the same from the outside: manicured lawns, trimmed hedges, freshly painted mailboxes. But something in the air had changed. People smiled more. Neighbors spoke again. The constant tension, the fear of getting fined, had vanished. The HOA still existed, technically, but it wasn't the same. The board now met in a smaller office, one corner of the building they leased from Marcus. Their tone softened. Their rules relaxed. And the residents, they finally felt like a community again. Marcus didn't talk about what happened. He didn't tell the story at dinner parties or post about it online. It wasn't about going viral. It was about peace. Because what he'd learned through it all wasn't just about property or paperwork. It was about patience. See, real power doesn't live in anger or loud retaliation. It lives in understanding the system and mastering it quietly. Where most people fight fire with fire, Marcus fought ignorance with intelligence. He turned their pettiness into a business decision. And in doing so, he rewrote the script, not just for himself, but for everyone who's ever been bullied by people hiding behind rules and clipboards. One afternoon, Marcus drove by the HOA office. The blinds were half closed. A for lease sign hung in one of the windows. They were moving out. He parked his truck for a moment, leaned on the steering wheel, and smiled. Not out of pride, but peace, because he finally understood something simple yet profound. Sometimes justice doesn't need a courtroom or a crowd. Sometimes it's just a man, a deed, and the truth on his side. He thought of his father then, a quiet man who'd once told him, "Don't fight small people with noise. Outthink them, and they'll hand you the keys themselves." Marcus chuckled softly. Turns out his father was right. That night, Marcus sat on his balcony, the same one they'd fined him for. The same paint, still perfectly fine. The city lights twinkled below, and the air felt different, lighter. He wasn't the angry homeowner anymore. He wasn't the target of small-minded authority. He was a man who had turned disrespect into legacy. He'd proven that the quietest victories often echo the loudest, not through shouting or revenge, but through calm, calculated grace. The HOA fined him for old paint. They mocked, they measured, they threatened, but while they were busy counting shades of gray, Marcus was counting deeds. They tried to control him with rules. He rewrote the rules with ownership, and in the end, he didn't need to fight for respect. He simply bought it.